The formal reception concludes with a precision display of the Academy's honor guard that leaves Zalfrix quietly disturbed. The humans move with a synchronicity that shouldn't be possible for such physiologically asymmetrical beings. Their ceremonial rifles snap from position to position with mathematical precision, yet Zalfrix notes an unsettling organic fluidity that Viridian cybernetically enhanced troops could never replicate. Impressive, aren't they? General Winters says, noticing his compound eyes fixed on the performance. Just wait until you see what they can do outside of ceremony. Zalfrix's translator implant catches something in her tone, pride certainly, but beneath it, a predatory satisfaction that sends an involuntary ripple through his exoskeletal plates. His personal quarters in the Academy's foreign dignitary wing exceed his expectations. The humans have clearly studied Viridian biology, adjusting atmospheric composition and gravity to approximate his homeworld. The attention to detail would be commendable if it didn't reinforce an uncomfortable reality. These humans have been meticulously studying potential adversaries while presenting themselves as diplomatic partners. After settling in, Zalfrix activates his secure communication array to file his initial report. Cultural assessment. Preliminary observations suggest humans place excessive value on physical demonstrations of discipline. Their welcoming ceremonies elevated form over tactical efficiency, likely intended to impress foreign observers. Viridian intelligence assessment of human military, as primarily technological, appears inconsistent with observed behavior. Recommend reassessment based on direct observation data. He pauses, mandibles clicking thoughtfully before adding, personal note, human military leadership exhibits concerning psychological characteristics. Academy Commandant displayed micro-expressions consistent with deception when discussing exchange program objectives. A gentle knock interrupts his report. At the door stands a junior officer, her uniform impeccably presented despite the late hour. Lieutenant Foster, sir. I've been assigned as your liaison during your stay, she says with a crisp salute. General Winters thought you might appreciate an evening tour of our facilities before tomorrow's official itinerary begins. Zalfrix hesitates. Unscheduled activities run counter to Viridian protocol, but adaptability is essential to his mission. That would be acceptable, Lieutenant. As they walk the Academy grounds, illuminated by the unfamiliar silver glow of Earth's moon, Foster points out training facilities with practiced efficiency. Zalfrix notices something the daytime arrival concealed. The Academy never truly sleeps. In shadowed combat rings, cadets spar under minimal lighting. Engineering students work through the night on prototype battlefield systems. A medical training unit practices emergency procedures in simulated darkness. Your cadets do not adhere to standard biological rest cycles. He inquires, noting how the humans seem energized despite the hour. Foster smiles. The enemy won't always attack during daylight hours, Commander. We train as we fight. They pass a dimly lit classroom where cadets study historical battle projections. Zalfrix pauses, his attention caught by a tactical display showing ancient human warriors vastly outnumbered yet achieving victory through what appears to be sheer determination rather than strategic advantage. The Battle of Thermopylae, Foster explains. One of our earliest military lessons enforced multiplication through terrain utilization and psychological warfare. Zalfrix absorbs this information with growing unease. The Confederation defines warfare through technological superiority and overwhelming force. These humans study ancient conflicts where primitively armed warriors prevailed against impossible odds. As they complete the tour, Zalfrix observes Foster check her chronometer. You should rest, Commander. Tomorrow's physical demonstrations begin at 500 hours. Physical demonstrations, Zalfrix inquires. Foster's expression reveals nothing as she responds. Combat readiness evaluation. I believe you'll find it educational. Returning to his quarters, Zalfrix adds a final line to his report. Urgent. Request comprehensive psychological profile of human response to perceived existential threats. Standard Confederation deterrence protocols may require significant revision. The afternoon heat presses down on the training grounds as Zalfrix observes what the humans casually refer to as combat conditioning. His environmental suit struggles to maintain optimal temperature as he stands beside Major Chen, watching cadets navigate an obstacle course that seems deliberately designed to maximize physical suffering. What purpose does this particular exercise serve? Zalfrix asks as a cadet drags herself through knee-deep mud beneath razor wire, her uniform torn and bloodied. Major Chen's eyes never leave the course. That's Cadet Miyazaki. Failed this course twice last month. Watch her face. Zalfrix focuses his compound eyes, adjusting to better capture human micro-expressions. Despite her obvious pain, the cadet's features show something unexpected, determination verging on satisfaction. When she clears the final obstacle, collapsing in exhaustion, her mud-streaked face breaks into a smile. Your species finds pleasure in physical distress. Zalfrix asks, genuinely confused. Chen laughs, a sharp sound without humor. Not the pain itself, Commander. The overcoming. Humans don't grow stronger without resistance. The concept seems fundamentally alien to Viridian philosophy, where efficiency and preservation of resources, including one's own body, represent the height of military wisdom. Later that afternoon, Zalfrix attends a tactical briefing where senior cadets present theoretical responses to a planetary invasion scenario. The alien officer notes with alarm how their strategies prioritize civilian evacuation over military asset preservation, a philosophy that contradicts every principle of Confederation tactical doctrine. When one cadet proposes a counterintuitive approach of deliberately sacrificing defensive positions to extend conflict duration, Zalfrix interrupts. This strategy guarantees higher casualties among your forces. The logical approach would be immediate diplomatic capitulation followed by insurgency operations after civilian evacuation. The room falls silent. The cadet who presented stands straighter, eyes focused somewhere beyond the classroom walls. With respect, Commander, human history suggests otherwise. The longer we fight, the more creative our resistance becomes. Premature surrender has never served Earth well. That evening in the officers' mess, Zalfrix observes another puzzling human ritual. Instructors who had been harshly critical of cadets during training now speak of them with unmistakable pride, recounting their failures with the same enthusiasm as their successes. Lieutenant Foster notices his confusion. They're hardest on the ones with the most potential, she explains, sliding into the seat across from him. It's how we show faith in their capabilities. In Viridian training, we eliminate failure by ensuring each soldier operates within optimal parameters, Zalfrix explains. Your approach seems deliberately inefficient. Foster's expression changes subtly. May I speak freely, Commander? Of course. The Confederation's approach to warfare is like a mathematical equation. Input determines output. Humans view combat differently. For us, it's a conversation between opposing wills. She leans forward, lowering her voice. And in conversations, the most interesting responses are often unexpected. Later, Zalfrix updates his report with troubling new observations. Human military doctrine appears fundamentally irrational when viewed through Confederation analytical frameworks. They deliberately create suboptimal conditions during training, valuing adaptability over efficiency. Most concerning, they appear to have evolved psychological mechanisms that transform distress into motivation. He hesitates before adding the final observation that has disturbed him most. Their combat philosophy contains an element entirely absent from Confederation doctrine. They expect to be surprised by their adversaries, and train specifically to function when plans fail. This suggests they may be uniquely resistant to conventional psychological warfare tactics. The transmission completes just as his environmental sensors detect approaching footsteps. Lieutenant Foster appears at his door, her expression unreadable. "Commander, you've been invited to observe tomorrow's live-fire exercises. The General thought you might appreciate seeing our more specialized training protocols." The subterranean training complex stretches beneath the Academy like a mechanical nervous system. Zalfrix's sensory appendages detect the subtle vibration of machinery and the distant rush of water as Lieutenant Foster leads him through security checkpoints to reach the observation platform. The shadow operative exercise simulates extraction scenarios where technology has been compromised, Foster explains, her voice echoing slightly in the concrete corridor. Cadets must rely on basic sensory input and team coordination. They enter a dimly lit control room overlooking the maze complex. Technicians monitor vital signs on displays that cast their faces in a ghostly blue glow. Major Chen acknowledges their arrival with a curt nod. "Perfect timing, Commander." Team Delta is approaching the third junction. On the monitors, thermal imaging shows 6 human forms moving through absolute darkness. Communicating through silent hand signals, Zalfrix recognizes from his briefings on human special operations. Their movements display a synchronized efficiency that reminds him uncomfortably of hive predators from Viridian's evolutionary past. Without warning, a technician activates a control sequence. The room temperature drops as the unmistakable sound of rushing water fills the speakers. On the thermal displays, cold blue spreads rapidly through the tunnels. These chambers are now flooding with water at precisely 4 degrees Celsius, Foster explains clinically. The human body begins to lose function rapidly at this temperature. Zalfrix's translator struggles to interpret his next vocalization. "You are inducing hypothermia in your cadets." Major Chen doesn't look away from the monitors. "The enemy won't always attack in comfortable conditions, Commander. They learn to function through the physiological effects: cognitive impairment, loss of motor control, pain." On screen, one cadet slips beneath the rising water. His teammates immediately alter their formation, one diving to retrieve him, while the others maintain defensive positions. The thermal signature of the rescuer dims noticeably as her core temperature plummets. That cadet's body temperature has dropped below safe parameters, Zalfrix observes. "Your monitoring systems must be triggering medical intervention protocols." Foster exchanges a glance with Chen. The exercise continues until completion or critical system failure. "Define critical system failure," Zalfrix demands. "Cardiac arrest," Chen responds flatly. But it rarely comes to that. Humans can endure more than our theoretical limits suggest. The exercise continues for another 27 minutes. Zalfrix watches in horrified fascination as the cadets' thermal signatures grow increasingly unstable, yet their movements remain purposeful. When they finally reach the extraction point, carrying a weighted dummy representing a wounded comrade, their bodies are functioning at temperatures that would render Viridian soldiers completely incapacitated. As medical teams rush to treat the emerging cadets, Zalthrix notices something that disturbs him more than the physical extremes. The humans are smiling, expressions of shared accomplishment passing between them as they wrap thermal blankets around blue-tinged limbs. This exercise has a 93% completion rate, Foster tells him, pride evident in her voice. Last year, it was only 87%. You deliberately increase the difficulty each year? Zalthrix asks. Of course. Otherwise, what would be the point? Later, reviewing the medical data from the exercise, Zalthrix discovers something that sends a ripple of alarm through his nervous system. The cadets' biometric readings show elevated endorphin levels correlating with the most extreme moments of physiological stress. Their biochemistry actually rewarding them for enduring conditions that should trigger retreat. His classified update to Confederation Command contains a warning he never expected to send. Humans appear to possess an evolutionary adaptation that converts survival threats into psychological rewards. This represents a critical vulnerability in standard Confederation subjugation protocols, which rely on progressive force escalation to trigger surrender responses. Preliminary analysis suggests that increasing pressure on human military units may paradoxically enhance their combat effectiveness. The observation deck overlooks a vast indoor training ground designed to replicate an urban combat zone. Holographic projections flicker across buildings, transforming the environment from metropolitan cityscape to rural village to industrial complex in rapid succession. General Winters stands beside Zalthrix, her posture relaxed, but her eyes intensely focused on the operations below. The crucible represents our philosophy of adaptive response. She explains as technicians initiate the exercise protocols. We created it after the Jakarta incident, when we realized predictable training produces predictable soldiers. Zalthrix accesses his briefing files on human military history. The Jakarta incident, 73 human casualties due to insurgent forces using unconventional tactics. Winters nods. We lost those soldiers because they couldn't adapt when their communications went dark, and their commanding officers were eliminated. Now we make sure that never happens again. Below them, the elite cadets move through the shifting landscape with practiced precision. Their loadout includes standard combat gear, but Zalthrix notes the conspicuous absence of advanced targeting systems or tactical support equipment. They rely primarily on hand signals and predetermined contingency plans. Phase 2, announces a technician. Without warning, the cadets' communication devices emit a high-pitched squeal before going silent. Simultaneously, the team leader clutches his chest as simulated gunfire strikes him. The holographic environment shifts again, plunging half the training ground into darkness while flooding another section. You've eliminated their command structure and communications simultaneously, Zalthrix observes. In Viridian tactical doctrine, this would trigger immediate regrouping and defensive positioning. What happens instead defies his expectations. Without hesitation, a previously subordinate cadet assumes command through nothing more than a series of hand gestures. The team splits into smaller units, each adapting to their specific environmental challenges. One group constructs an improvised bridge from debris to cross the flooded section. Another creates light sources from equipment not designed for illumination. They're not following any recognizable protocol, Zalthrix notes with growing unease. Captain Rodriguez, the exercise coordinator, joins them on the observation deck. That's precisely the point, Commander. We train them to recognize when protocols become liabilities. Phase 3, announces the technician. The simulation throws its final challenge. The extraction point shifts to an entirely new location while half the team's weapons systems malfunction. For any rational military unit, this would represent an unwinnable scenario requiring strategic withdrawal. The humans respond by becoming more aggressive. They adapt their malfunctioning weapons into distraction devices, using controlled detonations to create diversions. One cadet repurposes communication equipment into a rudimentary signal jammer. Another sacrifices her body armor to create a reflective surface for directing the team through sensor-dead zones. This is not warfare as the Confederation understands it, Zalthrix says quietly. You're teaching them to function outside of established parameters. General Winters turns to him, something ancient and predatory in her smile. Parameters are for machines, Commander. Humans excel when the rulebook becomes obsolete. The exercise concludes with all mission objectives achieved despite conditions specifically designed to ensure failure. As the cadets gather for debriefing, Zalthrix notices how they immediately begin discussing alternative approaches, ways they could have performed even better under impossible conditions. Later, in the privacy of his quarters, Zalthrix records his most disturbing observation, yet humans appear to possess a collective intelligence that manifests most effectively during system breakdown. While Confederation species respond to escalating chaos with increasing adherence to established protocols, humans display the opposite tendency, abandoning convention in favor of improvisation. This suggests conventional predictive models of human military response may be fundamentally flawed. They do not simply endure chaos, they'd weaponize it. The demonstration in the Academy's research wing begins routinely enough. Zalthrix follows Lieutenant Foster through security checkpoints into a reinforced chamber where engineering cadets prepare to showcase their experimental propulsion system. The prototype sits in the center of the room, a deceptively simple array of components that, according to the briefing materials, generates thrust through principles that superficially resemble Viridian technology while utilizing fundamentally different quantum interactions. The containment field stabilizes the reaction while allowing for controlled energy release, explains Cadet Zhang, her hands moving confidently across the control interface. We've managed to increase efficiency by 37% over previous iterations. Zalthrix notes with professional interest how the humans have approached similar technological challenges through different evolutionary pathways. Their solution lacks the elegance of Viridian engineering, but compensates with surprising adaptability. The first warning comes as a subtle vibration beneath his feet. The humans don't notice it, their less sensitive nervous systems failing to detect the microscopic harmonics building within the prototype. Zalthrix opens his mandibles to speak when a harsh alarm suddenly blares through the chamber. Containment field fluctuation announces an automated system. All personnel evacuate immediately. The cadets respond with practiced efficiency, shutting down systems and activating emergency protocols. Zalthrix moves toward the exit with the others when a catastrophic sound, metal tearing against fundamental forces, splits the air. The prototype implodes before explosive decompression sends shrapnel across the chamber. A piece of equipment ruptures, releasing a caustic chemical compound that reacts violently with the atmosphere. The resulting smoke contains particulates precisely sized to bypass Viridian respiratory filters. Zalthrix feels the burning immediately, his specialized breathing membranes dissolving on contact with the human-engineered compound. His vision fragments into kaleidoscopic patterns as his nervous system begins shutting down peripheral functions to preserve core consciousness. Through failing sensory apparatus, he registers something impossible. humans moving toward him rather than completing their evacuation. His translator implant captures fragments of their communication. Toxic to his system. Respiratory bypass required. Emergency protocol override. A female cadet reaches him first, her face already showing signs of chemical exposure. With methodical precision belying the chaos around them, she removes her emergency breathing apparatus and begins modifying it with tools from her belt. Zalfrix tries to communicate the futility of the action. Human respiratory equipment cannot be adapted to Viridian physiology without specialized fabrication facilities. Yet she continues, joined by 2 other cadets who expose themselves to the increasingly toxic environment. One suffers a visible chemical burn across his face, but continues working with unwavering focus. Through dimming consciousness, Zalfrix realizes they are attempting something that contradicts everything he understands about emergency response doctrine, improvising medical equipment for an alien species while sacrificing their own safety. The female cadet completes her modification and secures the hybrid device over his primary breathing orifice. The bypass isn't perfect. His secondary respiratory systems continue absorbing toxins, but the rate of deterioration slows. As darkness claims his peripheral vision, Zalfrix witnesses the humans forming a protective formation around him, using their bodies to shield him from secondary explosions while navigating toward the exit. His final conscious thought carries implications that will fundamentally reshape Confederation security doctrine. These humans value preserving his life above their own survival, despite his status as a potential adversary. Such behavior defies rational game theory. It suggests a species operating on principles that render them dangerously unpredictable in conflict scenarios, and more terrifying still, potentially immune to the psychological warfare tactics that form the cornerstone of Confederation military strategy. Consciousness returns to Zalfrix in layers, each more confusing than the last. His compound eyes struggle to focus on the medical bay ceiling, specially modified with Viridian spectrum lighting. The sharp antiseptic scent of human medical facilities mingles with the distinctive chemical signature of Viridian regenerative compounds. Someone has gone to extraordinary lengths to create a recovery environment suited to his physiology. Dr. Puttle approaches his bedside, her movements precise and economical. Your tertiary respiratory membranes suffered significant corrosion, Commander, but we've managed to stabilize the degradation. The modifications to our equipment were unorthodox but effective. Zalfrix attempts to process this information through the lingering neural fog. The cadets who assisted in my extraction, their status. Something flickers across the doctor's face, an expression his translator cannot quite interpret. 4 suffered significant chemical exposure. 2 remain under intensive care for respiratory damage. Cadet Lawson may have permanent optic nerve damage from the chemical splash that occurred while adapting the breathing apparatus for your physiology. The implication sends a tremor through Zalfrix's exoskeleton. A human has sacrificed permanent sensory capacity for a foreign dignitary, for a potential future adversary. Such behavior violates every principle of evolutionary self-preservation. I wish to speak with them, he manages, his translator struggling to modulate his strained vocalizations. When they're recovered enough, Dr. Petal responds. For now, General Winters has authorized temporary access to our historical archives to occupy your recovery time. She thought you might appreciate understanding the context of our emergency response protocols. A data terminal beside his recovery pod activates, displaying a menu of historical military engagements. Zalfrix notices immediately that these aren't the sanitized accounts provided in his diplomatic briefings. They include classified operational details, normally restricted to internal military analysis. As his condition stabilizes, Zalfrix immerses himself in these records, searching for patterns that might explain the behavior he witnessed. His confusion deepens with each file. Humans repeatedly demonstrate a peculiar inversion of tactical priorities during crisis scenarios, often compromising strategic advantages to preserve individual lives, yet also sacrificing individual lives for abstract principles. On the third day of his recovery, Cadet Santiago visits him. Her face bears the distinctive pigmentation changes of dermal regeneration treatment. According to the medical files Zalfrix accessed, she suffered third-degree chemical burns while modifying the breathing apparatus. The others wanted to come, she explains, settling carefully into the chair beside his recovery pod. But medical has them under observation for another 48 hours. You compromised your safety to assist a foreign dignitary, Zalfrix states, mandibles clicking in agitation. This contradicts basic survival imperatives. Santiago's expression suggests she finds his observation puzzling. With respect, Commander, that's not how we see it. You are the only Viridian in the facility, irreplaceable. Any of us are replaceable in that scenario. This is not rational risk assessment, Zalfrix insists. The cadet studies him, her recently regenerated skin still unnaturally smooth across her cheekbones. Maybe rationality is overrated in crisis situations. The universe doesn't care about our careful calculations when things go sideways. That night, Zalfrix transmits an encrypted analysis that would trigger immediate security protocols within Confederation leadership. Human emergency response doctrine contains a fundamental anomaly. They become more unpredictable as conditions deteriorate. Standard containment algorithms rely on increasing pressure to force predictable surrender behaviors. Humans display the opposite tendency. Under existential threat, they abandon predictable self-preservation behaviors in favor of values-driven responses that defy conventional strategic modeling. This represents an unprecedented challenge to the Confederation's security protocols. The Academy's secure archives occupy a subterranean level that predates the modern facility. Zalfrix moves cautiously through rows of physical data storage systems, his partially healed respiratory membranes still sensitive to the peculiar mustiness of paper records. General Winters granted him unprecedented access after his recovery, a decision that puzzles him until he begins to understand the psychological strategy behind it. "You are showing me your historical vulnerabilities deliberately," he says to Lieutenant Foster, who accompanies him through the archive. This contradicts basic information security protocols. Foster's expression remains neutral. General Winters believes in learning from history, Commander, including the parts we'd rather forget. The terminal he's been assigned provides access to conflict analyses spanning centuries of human warfare. Zalfrix focuses particularly on scenarios where human forces faced overwhelming technological superiority, situations analogous to a potential Confederation intervention. What emerges is a pattern so consistent it cannot be coincidental. When facing superior firepower, humans don't become more cautious, they become more innovative. The more desperate their situation, the more radical their adaptations. Technologies that revolutionize warfare often emerged not during peacetime research, but from the crucible of near defeat. More disturbing still, human forces regularly violate optimal game theory by accepting catastrophic losses to establish psychological deterrence. They sacrifice immediate tactical advantage for long-term strategic gains in ways that defy conventional military logic. Your species appears fundamentally irrational in conflict scenarios. Zalfrix observes as Foster returns with another set of classified files. Or perhaps rationality itself looks different when survival is at stake, she counters, placing a sealed container on the table. These are the personal journals of General Marcus Chen from the Martian Rebellion. They've never been digitized for security reasons. The General thought you might find them particularly relevant. The handwritten accounts detail a human commander's thought processes during Earth's bloodiest interplanetary conflict. Chen's forces, outgunned and outnumbered by corporate security forces, should have surrendered according to every tactical model. Instead, they adapted civilian mining equipment into devastating weapons, accepted casualty rates that would trigger automatic surrender protocols in Confederation forces, and ultimately prevailed through strategies that exploited their opponents' psychological unwillingness to match their escalating sacrifices. Most chilling is Chen's final entry. The enemy's fundamental mistake was believing we would break when victory became mathematically impossible. They failed to understand that humans don't calculate odds. We change them. Zalfrix works through the night, compiling a comprehensive analysis for Confederation High Command. The implications send tremors through his exoskeleton as he types. The Confederation's entire approach to potential conflict relies on rational actors making predictable choices to minimize losses. Humans appear constitutionally incapable of this form of rationality. When Foster arrives the following morning, she finds Zalfrix still at the terminal, his compound eyes showing signs of prolonged strain. "Did you find what you were looking for, Commander?" she asks. "I found something unexpected," he replies carefully. "Your species appears to lack a psychological surrender threshold. When conventional forces would accept defeat, humans merely shift their definition of victory." Foster's expression remains carefully neutral, but something in her posture shifts. A subtle readiness that Zalfrix's combat subroutines immediately identify as predatory anticipation. "Is that assessment going into your report to the Confederation?" she asks. "It would be dereliction of duty to omit it." Zalfrix responds, suddenly aware of the strategic implications of his own research. He has just identified a fundamental vulnerability in Confederation military doctrine, one that humans appear to understand better than his own leaders. Foster nods once, satisfaction evident despite her professional demeanor. "The General will be pleased you found our archives. Educational." The farewell dinner in the Academy's Grand Hall feels more like a military ceremony than a diplomatic function. Zalfrix observes the human rituals with new understanding, recognizing the subtle psychological warfare embedded in their traditions. The precise movements of the honor guard, the formal toasts, the carefully arranged seating, all designed to communicate determination and unity to potential adversaries. General Winters raises her glass in a final toast to peaceful cooperation between our civilizations. The assembled officers and cadets echo the sentiment, but Zalfrix perceives the undertone, the implied or else, that resonates beneath the diplomatic niceties. These humans are not naive. They understand precisely what his report to the Confederation will contain and are comfortable with the implications. After the formalities, the cadets who rescued him from the laboratory accident approach his table. Their injuries are healing, but Cadet Lawson still wears specialized lenses to compensate for her damaged optic nerve. They speak casually about their recovery, turning life-altering injuries into humorous anecdotes. "The doctors say I'll have heightened night vision in my left eye once the neural grafts finish integrating," Lawson jokes. "So really, it's more of an upgrade than an injury." "You permanently sacrificed optimal functioning for a foreign dignitary," Zalfrix observes. "Your species values individual lives to an extent that appears strategically counterproductive." Santiago laughs. With respect, Commander, you're overthinking it. We didn't save you because of some grand strategic calculation. Then why? Because that's what humans do, Lawson answers simply. We don't leave people behind, not our allies, not our enemies, not anyone we can possibly save. Later, General Winters escorts him to the landing pad where his transport awaits. The night air carries the scent of the Academy's gardens, a final sensory reminder of Earth that his olfactory receptors will retain long after his departure. Your report will reach Confederation Command within 3 days, Zalfrix states. They will find its contents concerning. Winters regards him with that peculiar human stillness that he now recognizes as controlled predatory focus. We certainly hope so, Commander. You understand this was never truly an exchange program, he continues. It was a demonstration. Let's call it a mutual educational opportunity, she replies. We learned about Viridian diplomatic protocols. You learned about human nature. What I learned, Zalfrix says carefully, is that the Confederation's standard approach to planetary integration would be catastrophically ineffective against Earth. Winter smiles. Then the exchange program was successful. As his ship breaks planetary orbit, Zalfrix completes his final transmission to Confederation High Command. The report is comprehensive, detailing human military capabilities, psychological resilience, and adaptation strategies. Its conclusion represents the first time in his distinguished career that he has advocated against standard Conquest protocols. Humans represent a unique psychological threat to Confederation security doctrine. Their combination of technological innovation, irrational self-sacrifice, and adaptive response under pressure renders them immune to conventional subjugation tactics. Most critically, they appear to become more dangerous when victory appears mathematically impossible. Standard escalation protocols would trigger unprecedented resistance rather than surrender. His final recommendation challenges centuries of Confederation expansion policy. Earth must be engaged exclusively through diplomatic means and integrated as a full member species rather than a subject civilization. The alternative, attempted military subjugation, would likely result in a protracted conflict with unpredictable outcomes. Humans do not merely resist conquest. They transform through the process of resistance, emerging stronger from conditions designed to weaken them. In the assessment of this officer, this represents an evolutionary adaptation that the Confederation has not encountered in its 12,000 years of expansion.